friendships that make headlines, and then there are friendships that quietly reshape a person from the inside out. The bond between Sir Elton John and Princess Diana was both. It played out across ballrooms and charity galas, through whispered phone calls and painful silences, and ultimately through a song that stopped the world. For years, fragments of the story surface here and there, a photograph, an anecdote, a tearful performance seen by billions. But it was not until Elton sat down to write his 2019 autobiography, Me, that the full truth of what Diana meant to him and what their friendship truly cost them both finally came into the open. What he confessed was not simply a story of two famous people who liked each other. It was a story of two deeply lonely souls who found in one another something the world around them could never provide. Someone who told the truth. By the time Elton John was heading into Windsor Castle for Prince Andrew's 21st birthday party in 1981, he was no stranger to royal affairs. The Queen Mother and Princess Margaret had long been fans of the musician since the 1970s, and he had become a staple at the most intimate family events. He had dined with duchesses and exchanged jokes with princes. Yet for all the chandeliers and titles, Elton never felt entirely at ease in those gilded rooms. He was, at heart, the nerdy kid from Pinner who had reinvented himself spectacularly, and no amount of royal proximity could fully quiet that insecurity. On the night of Prince Andrew's party, the ballroom featured a discotheque that Queen Elizabeth apparently found uncomfortably loud. It was turned down so low you could, according to Elton, literally hear your feet moving around the floor over the music. Then came a series of surreal moments. Princess asked Elton to dance at Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, and Queen Elizabeth herself appeared, handbag in hand, joining in as Bill Haley played. Elton later wrote that he was desperately trying to act normal, while the world around me appeared to have gone completely mad. And then, in the middle of all that royal absurdity, Diana Spencer walked in. She was not yet a princess, just a young woman weeks away from marrying Prince Charles and stepping into a role that would consume her entirely. Elton said in his autobiography that she was blessed with an incredible social ease, an ability to make people feel totally comfortable in her company. They were drawn to each other immediately. As Elton recalled, "We immediately clicked. We ended up pretending to dance to Charleston while hooting at the disco's feebleness. It was absurd, spontaneous, and entirely real. Two people finding each other funny in a room full of people trying very hard to be dignified. That night planted a seed that would grow into one of the most genuine friendships either of them would ever know. Over the years he knew her, Elton wrote, she was fabulous company, the best dinner party guest, incredibly indiscreet, a real gossip. You could ask her anything and she'd tell you. That quality, her refusal to perform composure when she didn't feel it, her willingness to speak plainly and laugh freely, was precisely what made her extraordinary in Elton's eyes. She was surrounded by people who guarded every word, and she was the one in the center of it all who simply couldn't be bothered to pretend. What deepened their friendship during the 1980s was not just humor or shared social circles. It was pain. Diana's marriage to Prince Charles was disintegrating in real time, though the palace maintained the fairy tale for as long as it could. She battled bulimia, depression, and a suffocating sense of isolation inside an institution that valued image above everything. Elton, for his part, was waging his own war behind the sequins and the spectacle. He was fighting addiction, self-destructive behavior, and the constant scrutiny of being one of the most famous men alive. Neither of them had to explain these things to the other. They simply recognized what they saw. In an ITV documentary, Elton said Diana had the ability to make people feel at ease and make them feel that everything is going to be all right, adding that he hadn't experienced many people in my life who have that ability. That was not the observation of someone who had merely rubbed shoulders with a celebrity. It was a testimony of a man who had been genuinely held together by another person's warmth at a time when he badly needed it. One of the remarkable things about Diana, in Elton's telling, was the effect she had on the people around her, an effect he came to call, in his autobiography, the Diana effect. He observed it firsthand at a dinner party he hosted that included Hollywood stars Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone, both of whom became completely smitten with Diana. According to Elton, Richard Gere and Diana ended up sitting in front of the fireplace together, locked in rapt conversation, while Sylvester Stallone grew visibly agitated. Stallone stormed off, muttering that he never would have come if I'd known Prince F.N. charming was going to be here. Diana, throughout the entire episode, held her composure entirely. Elton noted that where the two of the most famous action stars in Hollywood had nearly come to blows, she remained perfectly gracious and seemingly unaware of the chaos she had caused simply by being herself. But it was not her effect on powerful men that made the deepest impression on Elton. It was her effect on the powerless. He wrote about the famous photograph of Diana holding an AIDS patient's hand at the London Middlesex Hospital, saying, "I don't think she was necessarily trying to make a big point, although obviously she did. In that moment, she changed public attitudes to AIDS forever." This mattered enormously to Elton, who had established the Elton John AIDS Foundation in 1992 and had watched friends die from the disease during the epidemic's darkest years. He praised Diana's work with AIDS charities publicly, saying it was considered to be a gay disease. And for someone who was within the royal family, and who was a woman and who was straight, and to have someone care from the other side was an incredible gift. She didn't have to do it. She didn't have to shake those hands, or sit beside those beds, or look into those faces. She chose to. And that choice, Elton has said repeatedly, was one of the most courageous things he ever witnessed. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, the friendship was tested not by scandal or betrayal, but by the grinding pressure of their respective lives. Diana's world was narrowing even as her public profile expanded. Elton later wrote that he worried about her during this period, observing that she seemed to be losing touch with all sorts of really close friends who would be honest with her, and surrounding herself instead with people who told her what she wanted to hear, adding that it wasn't a healthy situation. He recognized it as a warning sign, the kind of isolation that comes not from being alone, but from being surrounded by the wrong people. Then came the falling out. It arrived not through any dramatic confrontation, but through a professional disagreement that cut deep because of what it represented. Elton had been working on a coffee table photography book called Rock and Royalty, put together by their mutual friend Gianni Versace, with all proceeds going to the Elton John AIDS Foundation. Diana had agreed to write the foreword. Her name on the project was more than a courtesy. It was a statement of solidarity, an extension of the same courage she had shown at that hospital years before. Diana had also promised to attend the launch of the book, which was set as a fundraising dinner for Elton's AIDS Foundation in February 1997. After over $400,000 worth of tickets had already been purchased, the princess changed her mind upon seeing an advance copy of the book. The book contained photographs of semi-nude male models. As Elton wrote, "I think Buckingham Palace didn't like the idea of a member of the royal family having anything to do with a book that featured shots of naked guys with towels draped around them." Elton had been furious when Diana changed her mind. He'd written to her to tell her how much money she cost his AIDS Foundation. Elton wrote in his autobiography, "She was a very dear friend for years, and then, completely unexpectedly, we fell out." Diana responded to his letter with what he described as a sharp and cold reply. After that, silence fell between them, months of it. Two people who had once told each other everything now had nothing to say. What made the silence especially painful, Elton later admitted, was that he could have broken it at any time and chose not to. Pride held him in place. He knew she was navigating the most turbulent period of her life. Her divorce from Prince Charles was finalized in 1996, and she lost her HRH title with it. She was building a new identity outside the palace walls, defining herself through her humanitarian work, and doing so largely without the support of the institution that had once defined her. Elton knew all of this, and still he did not pick up the phone. What finally broke through was grief. On July 15, 1997, Gianni Versace was shot and killed outside his Miami Beach mansion. Diana called Elton at his home and nice the same day. "I'm so sorry. It was a silly falling out. Let's be friends," she told him. Then, at Versace's funeral in Milan, the two came face to face for the first time in months. There's a famous photograph of Diana leaning over to comfort Elton at the funeral, though he later set the record straight about what was actually said in that moment of apparent tenderness. The warm words of comfort coming from her lips at that exact moment were actually, "God, I'd love a polo." They laughed. Of course they laughed. That was who they were to each other. The one person in the room who could make the other forget, just for a second, how sad everything was. They made plans to see each other again soon. There were things to talk about, a friendship to rebuild properly, time to spend together. But when Elton later appeared on television to discuss that summer, he described it with a kind of stunned disbelief. Johnny Versace was murdered, and then Diana rang me up and we reconciled. And 6 weeks later, I'm in the same house, and she's dead. It was an extraordinary and mesmerizing summer, and I just couldn't believe what was going on. Princess Diana was killed in Paris on August 31st, 1997. She was 36 years old. The circumstances were brutal. A car chase through a tunnel, the blinding flashes of paparazzi cameras, the incomprehensible swiftness of the end. Elton woke to the news in the early hours of the morning and found himself unable to process it. Weeks earlier, they had been laughing together. Now the world was changed in a way that could never be undone. It was Sir Richard Branson, with the blessing of the Spencer family, who approached Elton with the idea of performing at Diana's funeral and rewriting the lyrics of his 1973 song Candle in the Wind. The song had originally been written with lyricist Bernie Taupin as a tribute to Marilyn Monroe, another blonde icon consumed too young by the machinery of fame. Taupin spent 2 hours adapting the lyrics, wanting the rewritten version to resemble an entire country saying goodbye, rather than a single person. The new opening line, "Goodbye England's Rose," was simple, direct, and devastating. When Elton began to sing the first line at Westminster Abbey on September 6, 1997, his voice cracked with emotion. He later wrote about what he saw when he looked out at the congregation. William and Harry looked completely shell-shocked. They were 15 and 12, and I thought the way they were treated that day was absolutely inhuman. They were forced to walk through the streets of London behind their mother's coffin, told to show no emotion and look straight ahead. It was a horrendous way to treat two kids who just lost their mom. The song was released as a single on September 13, 1997. It has since sold over 33 million copies worldwide, becoming the second best-selling single of all time, behind Bing Crosby's White Christmas. Proceeds from the song benefited Princess Diana's numerous charities, and it won Elton a Grammy for Best Male Pop Vocal Performance in 1998. But Elton has never celebrated those numbers. The song became an international bestseller, staying at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 14 weeks. But John wasn't happy with its success. He has said that the song is not a hit to him. It is a wound. He has never performed again since that day inside Westminster Abbey. Elton John refuses to ever play the song again after the funeral. Radio stations cease playing it after 4 weeks as a mark of respect. That restraint, the refusal to turn grief into a performance, to cash in on sorrow, is one of the truest things he has ever done. He carried the song once, in the only way that mattered, and then he put it down. In the years that followed, Elton kept his promise to Diana in the way he knew best, by staying close to her sons. He performed at Prince Harry's wedding at Windsor Castle, and was invited to Prince William's 2011 wedding as well. He has worked with Harry on various charitable causes over the years. When Harry and Meghan faced intense press scrutiny, Elton was among the loudest voices in their defense, posting on Instagram that he felt a deep sense of duty to protect them from the kind of media intrusion that had contributed to Diana's death. What Elton confessed in Me, and in the interview surrounding it, is not easy listening. He admitted he let pride keep him from calling a friend he loved. He admitted that the silence between them during those final months haunted him. He admitted that the reconciliation at Versace's funeral felt like a gift he had not yet found a way to be grateful for when it was taken away. These are not the confessions of a man performing grief for public sympathy. They are the reckoning of someone who learned, too late and too suddenly, that there is no safe time to leave important things unsaid. Elton believed that Diana's sons, William and Harry, have inherited their mother's remarkable ability to connect with people, the same quality that made Diana unforgettable to everyone who encountered her. He sees her in them. And in that, perhaps, there is some small consolation for a loss that is never really closed. Their friendship was not a fairy tale. It was messier and realer and more human than that. It was built on laughter in a badly lit ballroom, sustained through a decade of shared struggles, fractured by pride and palace politics, and repaired, briefly, beautifully, over a shared joke at a funeral. It ended before either of them was ready, and it left behind a song that an entire planet wept to, which its performer refuses to play again, because some things are not meant to be repeated. They are meant to be felt once, fully, and then carried forward in silence. That is the truth Elton John has spent years finding the courage to tell. And it turns out the truth, like the friendship itself, is not a grand statement. It is simply this. He loved her, he lost her twice, and he has never stopped carrying her with him,